First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. And they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me. And by that time, there was no one left to speak up. It's a very moving statement that I think about all the time whenever I hear of some tragedy in the world. This past week, we just heard of as many as 50 individuals in worship in New Zealand who lost their lives. We've seen these attacks in places of worship, people in synagogues and churches who've lost their lives because someone, driven by hate, decides that they need to go. So this morning, as we recall those lives, we pray that their memories may be blessed and their families and loved ones may find comfort and healing. Should we take a moment in silence? Gracious God, we see the wonderful butterflies reminding us life, resurrection, joy, all that is beautiful in your creation. Then we hear the stories of horror, and despair. We are saddened. We turn to you because you are our rock, you are our strength, you are our Redeemer. We pray that you might enable us to find hope and joy and peace. So we pray, God, that the words of my mouth may be acceptable in your sight this day. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. As you can tell from the hymns we've been singing and the words which we have been sharing in the litany, we are reflecting, as this is the month of March, generally celebrated as Women's History Month. We are celebrating women this month. I always begin, as I reflect on the work of women, with my own mother and my own grandmother, who were so influential in shaping my own life. My grandmother, who I recall was strictly a person of generosity and hospitality. And those were the first inklings for me of what the Christian life really called us to be and to be about. I think of the passage from 2 Timothy, where Paul writes, it says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that lived first in your grandmother, Lois, and your mother, Eunice, and now I am sure that same faith lives in you. And I suspect that that is the story of many of you here this day, that you have learned so much from the women in your lives as you look back over time and the way you have been shaped. Grandmothers, aunts, godmothers, teachers. As I thought about this message and as it fell within the context of this week, it struck me that there is a way in which we might say, first, they came for the women. First, they came for the women, because over the course of human history, we collectively have refused to see the image of God in women. Because they came for the women, they were able to come for people of color, and then for people of other religions. If, however, we are made in the image of God, you see, then all of us are reflected in who God is. We are in God. our maleness and femaleness, our ethnicity is within the Godhead. God does not reject femaleness. So today, as we celebrate women, we are mindful that God comes to us as the God who embraces femaleness, femininity, women. God comes to us as the prophet Isaiah portrays God as a midwife. The passage says, before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard of such a thing? This is not what one expects, is it? However, the writer goes on to show that God is not like this. God does not act out of character. God is trustworthy. You can trust God to show up at the right time and do the right thing. And so the prophet Isaiah continues with this imagery of God as midwife. Shall I open the womb and not deliver? Says the Lord. Shall I, the one who delivers, shut the womb? Says your God. The expected answer is no. No, you won't. Because that would be inconsistent with your nature. So the word to the people from the prophet Isaiah is that God as your midwife can be trusted to show up at the right time and to do the right thing. Today, as we celebrate women, we are mindful that God comes to us not only as a midwife who comes at the right time and does the right thing, but God comes also as our mothering God, as we sang in our opening hymn. In the Hebrew Bible, indeed, there are abundant images, feminine images of God. And here in our text, of Jerusalem, the city of God. God promises to comfort God's people as a mother comforts her child. In our first text, the feminine image is of Jerusalem. Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her. All you who love her, rejoice with her in joy. All you who mourn over her, that you may nurse and be satisfied from her consoling breast, that you may drink deeply with delight from her glorious bosom. For thus says the Lord, I will extend prosperity to her like a river, and the wealth of the nations like an overflowing stream. And you shall nurse and be carried on her arm and dandled on her knees, as a mother comforts her child. So I will comfort you. You shall be comforted in Jerusalem. So a mothering God is the one who comforts the child and promises that if you know how a mother comforts her child, you can be guaranteed, you can have an assurance that God in like manner will comfort you. Isn't that beautiful? So with the image of a midwife and the image of a mother, we are told how God is trustworthy and how God will comfort God's people. And in the teaching of Jesus, as Jesus weeps over Jerusalem, he offers himself with the image, that mothering image of a hen who wishes to gather her baby chicks. Jesus mourns over Jerusalem and says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. You were not willing. You were not willing to be gathered Jesus is grieved that the efforts at mothering the people are rejected. And we as a people, over these many years and centuries, have rejected a mothering God because we have created communities and cultures that demean and devalue women. And when we demean and devalue women, then we will reject the mothering of God. The more we devalue women, the less we want to hear or embrace God's mothering activity. Am I right? So for centuries, we know that women were relegated to positions that were out of sight and out of mind. They were to stay in the women's quarters, the women's tent, while men were allowed to go run wild, so to speak, do everything that's in the public sphere. Women were sometimes assigned less value than their very own children, especially if those children, or especially if that child was a son. And we've come a long way, haven't we? We've come a long way today with women in public spaces, not just relegated to private spaces. We see women as medical professionals, bankers and scientists and musicians and teachers and entrepreneurs and sports figures and Olympic stars and senators and governors and heads of states in countries around the world. We know this was not always the case, so we've come a long way. Indeed, even in the scriptures, we have blatant cases where women are omitted. Think, for example, of this well-known story of the feeding of the 5,000. Both Mark and Luke tell us that 5,000 men were fed. Mark says those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. Luke tells us there were about 5,000 men. But Matthew says something a little bit more revealing. Matthew says, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So how many people did Jesus actually feed? Possibly 10,000. Matthew lets the cat out the bag. We don't count women. The Bible is revealing a culture 2,000 years ago that does not include women in the count. And that's not surprising because we know that in this country of ours, as progressive as it is, women had to fight for the vote. And that's not that long ago. Some of your parents were born before women received the right to vote in 1920. Here's another example in the Bible. The gospel writer is talking about Jesus' family and asks the question, as the villagers ask the question, is not this the carpenter's son, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? Notice the time is taken to mention the names of all of the brothers, all of the sons. Not the sisters. But in our reading today, in our gospel reading today, we recognize that indeed women were with Jesus in his ministry. We are told soon afterwards he went on through the cities and villages proclaiming and bringing the good news of God. And in the last part of that verse, there were many others who provided for them out of their resources. Don't hear a lot about that, do we? The women who were traveling with Jesus and providing for him and his companions out of their resources. Isn't that beautiful? And we know of the women who went to the tomb to anoint his body. We know that it was Mary, the woman, who was the first to see him in the garden on the morning of resurrection. Within the Methodist tradition, we think of people like Susanna Wesley, and we're told that she disagreed with her husband, who was a priest, Samuel Wesley, an Anglican priest, on many matters, including theology and politics. In one article that I read, the writer says, something nearly unheard of in those days. A woman would disagree so vehemently with her husband on issues of theology and politics. So once in his absence as the priest, Wesley left town, and his replacement in the rectory was doing a less than satisfactory job, in Susanna Wesley's opinion. So she started to have prayer meetings in her own home for her children, her servants, and for anyone who wished to attend. So on his return, Susanna was given a severe scolding by Samuel, her husband, and she responded that he, if he wants her to stop, he must command her to stop, so that when they stood in judgment before God, she would not be judged guilty for neglecting the opportunity to do good to souls. Brilliant woman, isn't she? Susanna Wesley must have had a tremendous impact on her own children. As we know, she started to teach them to read and to write the minute they could walk and talk. And she taught them the way of Christ. Through her influence on her son Wesley, we know that John Wesley licensed Sarah Crosby to preach in 1761. In the United States, women were ordained as early as the late 1800s in some of the Methodist traditions that precede our coming together as the United Methodists. But as soon as they were ordained, then there would be some conference that would either challenge their ordination or revoke it entirely, and they would leave one Methodist conference and go to another Methodist conference. From the Methodist Episcopal, they would go to the Methodist Protestant, and they like trying to find ordination. And as soon as they received it, then there would be a conference resolution that we passed to revoke their ordination. For instance, in 1857, the United Brethren, which became part of the United Methodists when we combined in 1968, they passed a resolution that no woman should be allowed to preach. It is in 1956 that in the lifetime of many of us here, that women indeed were given the vote to become fully ordained members of the ordained clergy. And then there are so many women who stand out in history. We think of Isabella Baumfree, an enslaved woman who later became known as Sojourner Truth. We think of Fanny Crosby. In 1863, she was a lifelong Methodist, but blind from infancy. And she wrote in that year, 1863, her first hymn. And she would go on to write more than 9,000 hymns. Many of them remain, to this day, perennial favorites. You can think of Blessed Assurance. To God be the glory. Pass me not, O gentle Savior. So we today have this opportunity not only to celebrate a mother in God, but to think of all the women who've gone before to be great examples for us. We think of his own mother, Mary, who was the one who said, Lord, let it be to me according to your word, and allowed herself to be used by God. We think of the women who found their way through the crowd to seek healing from Jesus. We think of the woman who pours out her love for him, washing his feet with tears, and wiping and drying them with her hair. We think of the woman who carries and anoints him with an expensive ointment that she carried in an alabaster jar. We think of women like Martha, who prepared his meal, and Mary, who sat at his feet so she could learn. We think of the women who traveled with him and prepared for him out of their resources. And we think of the women gathered here today. Since I have been in this congregation, I have been impressed by the witness of women in this congregation, which is true for almost every church I've seen. It's the women who bear the mantle, who take the leadership. Yet, this has happened through years and years and years of being belittled and rejected and refused and being downtrodden. We thank God for the power of the Spirit that through the years has continued to raise up women and to say, look, you are made in the image of a wonderful mothering God. Go forth into that spirit. Go forth with that witness. Go forth, hold your head up high, knowing that God does not reject God's own creation. In God, you are accepted. In God, you go forth. And as Crosby wrote, to God be the glory. And may our lives continue to bring honor and glory